When you draw a shape, you need to set a color for it. Because it is a vector shape, you cannot use brush tool or paint bucket tool or gradient tool or even razor tool. To set the colors, you need to select the rectangle or other shape tools and draw it. And then go to the options and set the fill color and or stroke color. If you already have a shape layer, you can select the layer by clicking the shape layer in the layers panel and highlight it. Then click on one of shape tools or press the U key. By this, again you have access the same options bar to change the fill color and or stroke color. If you want to set fill or stroke colors, you have four choices. The first choice is to have no color. You see, I have no color for fill and no color for the stroke. The result is the path mode, isn't it? Second option is to set a solid color. To set a solid color, you can select a color from the below swatches, and if this color swatches doesn't satisfy you, then click on the gear icon and in the context menu, select load swatches. Then you can browse to your installed Photoshop folder, preset subfolder, and color swatches subfolder. And now you can select each precious color swatches book shipped with your Photoshop. I select Pantone Plus CMYK coated.aco, a valuable book of colors, all prepared for CMYK coated printing. Also, if you like to change the view of swatches, on the gear button again and click on the small thumbnail, large thumbnail, small list or large list. Also, you can reset the swatches to its default state by clicking on the reset swatches and then answer OK to the question, replace current color swatches with the default colors. Now you have the default color swatches. Another way of selecting a solid color is to click on the color picker icon on the top right side of the panel. By clicking on it, you can access to the most famous and gorgeous and traditional color picker of the Photoshop, with all its properties of picking colors, entering HSL codes, RGB codes, lab codes, and CMYK codes, or even hexadecimal code. And of course, you have access to the color libraries as well. OK, after selecting your solid color, click OK and you have it. Another tip I'd like to mention in Color Picker is that you have access to the eyedropper tool to select color from other images during the Color Picker dialog is open. And the last tip for solid color is that the most recently used colors listed here, and you can reselect them and reuse them as you wish. The third type of color you can select for fill or stroke color is gradient. Here again, you have some gradient presets, and you can load more presets by clicking the gear icon and then clicking on load gradients, and then you can browse to your installed Photoshop folder, preset subfolder, gradient subfolder, and now you can select each gradient presets shipped with your Photoshop. For instance, I select spectrum.grd, and as soon as I click the load button, the preset gradients are loaded in the panel. Also, I can change the gradient types by clicking on the drop-down list and select one of the gradient types. They can be linear, radial, angle, reflected, or diamond. And also, you can change the angle of the gradient by typing the value or by dragging the rotate icon. By increasing or decreasing the scale value, you can change the scale of the gradient. And by keeping align with the layer checked on, Photoshop aligns the gradient angle with the layer angle. Otherwise, the selected shape acts as a mask that I'll explain in chapter 3. Now, if you try to transform the shape by pressing Ctrl plus T on your keyboard and change the position and the scale and rotate this shape, then you can figure out what this option does. Finally, and the most important thing in gradient color is to make our custom gradients. This is very easy. You can see a gradient sample here in the panel. Also, you see some buckets above and below the sample ribbon. The below buckets use for setting the colors, and the above buckets for setting the opacity. For this, you can double-click on each below buckets to set the color. To add the colors, you can click anywhere below the sample. And to remove them, just click and drop them downward. Adding opacity buckets is the same as color, but on top of the sample ribbon. Also, to set the value of the opacity for each bucket, just select the bucket and set the opacity value in percentage. The last tip here is to reverse the color gradients by clicking on the reverse the gradients colors. The fourth and last type of colors is pattern. Patterns are repeatable designs. After selecting a pattern, you have just one option to set, the scale of the pattern. And also you can add other preset patterns to the panel by browsing to your installed Photoshop folder, preset subfolder, and pattern subfolder, and now you can select each pattern's preset shipped with your Photoshop. For instance, I select rockpatterns.pat, and now I can select patterns among these newly added patterns. Selecting colors for both fill and strokes are the same. However, there are some additional options for strokes that I explain in the next movie.